morning we're talking about energy. How we typically energize our homes and our economy is a prime example of how unsustainable our society has become. When it comes to fossil fuels, we see all the symptoms, the problems that we incur when we try to build an economy on a foundation of finite resources. The instability and violence when it comes to competition over a finite resource. The environmental degradation in extracting those resources and the ongoing degradation that comes with the use of these resources. Unique to burning fossil fuels is the phenomena of climate change. We quite literally are taking carbon that has been sequestered or pulled from our atmosphere over millions and millions of years, thus making our planet habitable for higher life forms, such as ourselves, and releasing those carbons back into the atmosphere in a very small fraction of that time. That's the challenge we're facing today. So it's clear that this continued reliance on fossil fuels has left us vulnerable economically as well as environmentally. Transitioning to alternative renewable energy is imperative. But I think we all understand that the switch to renewable energy will simply not work, will not be enough, unless we become more energy efficient as well. This plenary will focus on what is being considered at the local, state, and national levels to facilitate more sustainable energy systems. And I'm going to introduce really our whole panel all at once and then let them run with it. Hopefully we'll have some time for questions at the end because we do want to foster dialogue along these lines. But let me first begin by saying Congressman Arcuri, you'll notice, is not here. He sends his regrets, but he's attending a funeral service for a serviceman in his district. So that's completely understandable. In his place, we have Bob Messenger, Congressman Arcuri's field representative out of the Cortland office. Bob was born in Oneida, New York, and earned his Bachelor's of Arts degree from the University of Notre Dame. He has had over 40 years of public-private experience, having worked for national companies like the Atlantic Richfield Company, General Foods, and Noxel Corporation. He acquired a background in solid waste management as general manager of a mid-sized waste hauling company, the recycling coordinator for Cortland County, and as solid waste specialist for the New York Rural Water Association. He's been on Congressman Arcuri's staff since the congressman was first sworn into office in 2007. Bob runs the congressman's Cortland satellite office. The official position is listed as caseworker, field representative. Those satellite offices act as the eyes and ears of the congressman while he's working in Washington. Next, we have Donna Lupardo. I introduced her last night, so I won't embarrass her again, only to say, as a review, Donna serves as the New York Assemblywoman for the 126th District. Before that, she served on the Broome County Legislature. Elected in 2004, she was the first woman to represent Broome County in the state legislature. She serves on the election law, committees of election law, environmental conservation, higher education, library and education, technology, mental health, transportation, all those committees. I'm tired just listing them. Donna has been a vocal advocate for economic revitalization of upstate New York and has distinguished herself as an independent, reform-minded legislator. Donna's life is a lifelong environmentalist, as I listed last night, long before it became trendy. She has a heartfelt concern for social justice as well. Of the many people I've known over the years, she is one of the few that understood this early on, those connections between ecological justice and social justice. Next, we have Dennis Mastro. He's the Southern Tier Regional Energy Smart Communities Program Coordinator for NYSERDA, New York State Energy Research and Development Authority. Denny is he has over 38 years experience in the energy industry. This includes 33 years management for an investor-owned utility and 5 years representing NYSERDA. Obviously, he will be talking more about that program in a little bit. Denny received his bachelor's degree, in electrical engineering from SUNY Binghamton. He also has an MBA from Syracuse University. Last but not least, we have Emmaia Gelman. She's director of the Green Policy Center for the Center for Working Families. Her work includes developing the center's portfolio of policy ideas linking climate change, jobs, economic development, and housing. Over the last 15 months, Emmaia's central work has been to convene a coalition of over 150 New York State organizations representing communities, labor, business, and others to generate the Green Jobs, Green Homes New York Policy Blueprint, co-published by the Center for American Progress, and already the subject of strong legislative campaign. And I'll let her describe that program for you momentarily. Emmaia is also a lifelong organizer on housing, policy, AIDS, and LGBT rights, as well as democracy issues in Northern Ireland and Palestine. In 2007, she completed a mid-career master's degree in urban planning at Massachusetts Institute of Technology. So that is our panel, and we will begin with Bob.
Let me state right up front that Congressman Arcuri is a strong supporter of sustainable communities and is an advocate for the many diverse methods used to achieve them. Alternative energy, public transportation, and conservation programs have been a cornerstone of Congressman Arcuri's commitment to the environment, energy solutions, and economic development. He feels that upstate New York's location, natural resources, and our scientific and technical community make us poised to be at the forefront of an energy revolution and take advantage of the emerging green economy. Just 1 month after taking office, Congressman Arcuri hosted an alternative energy forum in Lansing, New York, close to Cornell, that gathered together business leaders, scientific experts, and citizens to begin a process to make upstate New York a major alternative energy center, and he has been working on that ever since. Congressman Arcuri recently supported and voted for the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, the infamous stimulus, which included huge commitments to energy efficiency and renewable energy. The ARRA is providing over $30 billion for energy initiatives such as a new smart power grid, advanced battery technology, research and development including biomass, geothermal, and other forms of renewable energy. These will create hundreds of thousands of jobs. The ARRA, or the Stimulus Act, should transform the nation's electricity systems through the Smart Grid Investment Program to modernize the electricity grid and to make it more efficient and reliable. It also supports American development of advanced vehicle batteries and battery systems through loans and grants so that we can lead the world in transforming the way automobiles are powered. It also provides over $20 billion in tax incentives for renewable energy and energy efficiency. It includes a 3-year extension of the production tax credit for electricity derived from wind that will run through 2012, and from electricity derived from biomass, geothermal, hydropower, landfill gas, waste to energy, and marine facilities. and that will run through 2013. It also promotes energy-efficient investments in homes by extending and expanding tax credits through 2010 for purchases such as new furnaces, energy-efficient windows, doors, and insulation. Now, I realize there's been much talk about the ARRA, or the stimulus bill, but let's not forget the budget bill. Congressman Arcuri supported and voted for the House's budget, within which a huge commitment to renewable energy and energy efficiency is made. While the bill has not been completed on the Senate side yet, it's estimated that New York State could receive well over $1 billion to put towards green energy projects. I must also mention that Congressman Arcuri, as a member of the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, is a vocal and strong proponent of mass transit and rural transit. The transportation bill is one of the major undertakings of this 111th Congress, and I'd like to quote the congressman here. Quote, "In the past, the bill was known as the highway bill, but I can assure you that with the priorities of reducing congestion, idling, and emissions, this year's reauthorization will be taking a much broader approach, encompassing all surface transportation modes and not just highways." Congressman Arcuri has been a strong supporter of high-speed rail and was gratified to see President Obama get on that train just a couple of days ago. He would like to see more investment in mass transit and rural transit, high occupancy vehicle lanes in urban areas, intelligent highways and transportation systems, and many other programs that encourage Americans to get out of our cars. I might also note that Congressman Arcuri has requested federal funding for a biomass project just north of here in Dryden, New York. This request includes money to plant special hardwood trees that grow faster and produce 2 to 4 times more biomass per tree. That funding hasn't been approved yet, but the Congressman is encouraging it. As Assemblywoman Lupardo knows, we don't always get all we ask for. Congressman Arcuri recognizes that we face enormous challenges with climate change and the ways we have been powering the country. He recognizes that drill, baby, drill might sound good, but at best is a short-term solution and not a very good one at that. He believes that while the long-term goal will require much effort, innovation, and maybe even a little pain, that conservation and renewable energy in all of its various forms will prove to be our best solution. Congressman Arcuri believes that we can have it both ways. We can live good lives with green energy that will not only protect our planet, but also promote our economy. So if you'd like more detail on the federal programs, please see me afterward. If I don't have the answer, I promise to get them. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. And we'll certainly have time for questions as we get to the end. Donna?
Well, I came to this work with a background in mental health, which, as it turns out, has prepared me rather well for the political life. But also, after listening to the conversation last night with Gay Nicholson, it became abundantly clear to me that we're not just trying to establish some new policy directions, that in the systems approach that she was talking about, we really have to change people's mindsets. Not just the mindset of the general public, but our own mindsets. Because we've all been working in our own little niches, in our own little ways, and I look across the room, and many of us have been working this for many, many years together, and have grown up together in this work. And I'm beginning to see how, in order for our own work to be sustainable, that we're going to have to stretch our own comfort levels as we move into this new way of thinking in this new world that we're in, the new normal that I've been hearing about. Now, the tension that we are facing in the state has to do with the need for, obviously, the reduction of dependence on foreign oil, but how do we get there? On the one hand, we've got folks who are forcing us into a position of making all possible use of domestic energy resources. And as someone mentioned yesterday, we're in Marcellus Gas Drilling Central here. And you mentioned drill, baby, drill. For my part, and for many of you who've been working on this issue, we've tried to slow it up so that we can at least revise our regulatory approach to gas drilling, especially on the Marcellus, so that we can be more responsible environmental stewards. So, and we've taken some flack for that. I'm sure that you must realize this, because there is an economic urgency. But as it turns out, the economy for gas drilling has sort of slowed up a bit. And it has, I think, given us a fabulous opportunity to actually get it right. We hope we can at least move in the right direction that way. There's also, besides trying to tap natural resources, there's also the emphasis on exploring alternative energy sources. For the state's part, we have committed a lot of resources to research and development, into higher education. A lot of those monies were restored to the budget for our Centers for Excellence. Specifically here at Binghamton University, they are doing some terrific work on alternative energy. Their solar project is especially noteworthy. I believe that they are certainly on the verge of producing the new generation of solar roofing tile, for example. Their battery program and many others are truly state-of-the-art that people are looking toward. There was an interest in cutting some of that money out of the budget, and we were able to save that. I guess for my part, my interest has been, and my focus has been on demand reduction. Some of you have been down the road with us on the NYRE issue, and one of our big arguments during that was maybe we won't need this if we can focus on the demand side of the equation. I think we had a pretty big victory. It got lost in the shuffle somehow this week, and for those of you who were involved in this, congratulations. That was a hard-fought victory. We hope it's off the table. It's certainly been taken off the table right now. It gives us a chance to really emphasize the issue of demand. But for my part, I had passed a piece of legislation that would deprive NYRE from the use of eminent domain, which put a little chink in their approach. It was the first time in my professional life that I was ever sued by a major corporation as a result of that. They took exception to that legislation, and I had a very good lawyer, the Attorney General, turns out. When a legislator is sued, he becomes your lawyer of choice. And we did win that suit, and I'm sure that helped to add to the climate, so to speak, that led NYRE to eventually step back. For the governor's part, he has set very aggressive targets. I think you probably may address that. We've expanded the net metering laws. We have, as I mentioned already, we're investing in clean energy. We're using the stimulus money to expand green-collar training programs. Here in Broome County, the Broome-Tioga workforce is very aggressive. It's probably one of their primary focuses right now, is to help displaced workers and people who want new careers take advantage of this. But again, we learned last night, it's not a matter of just creating these jobs. You have to not only create the jobs, but the demand and the whole infrastructure, so that we're not setting up an unrealistic expectation. And our next speaker will also talk about the need for those types of collaborations. We want to be helpful at the state level and not make more problems in the long run. One thing that was mentioned last night that I think some of you might take heart in knowing is that Governor Patterson established a state green procurement and agency sustainability program. It's Executive Order number 4, which you can find on the governor's website, where he created this council of members from various agencies. And he also ordered a variety of approaches, which will sound like music to many of us, where as of July of last year, for example, he ordered that all paper supplies purchased by the agencies be composed of 100% post-consumer recycled paper, and a bunch of other procedures that we've been talking about forever, that the state is now embracing. I mentioned last night a bill that I am co-sponsoring. It passed in the Assembly, which really goes one step further. that it requires the agencies to really develop together in a collaborative fashion approaches to sustainability, so that it's not working with each individual agency on how they can become more sustainable in their purchasing, procurement, and their overall practices, but also how together, cross-disciplinary way, they can help the state move toward a more sustainable approach. I must say that I'm sort of pleased to see what the state has done. Recently, I realized that in the state cafeteria, all of the plasticware is now, what's the word I'm looking for? Not compostable, but biodegradable. I found that out as it was degrading. I was trying to reuse it, as most of us will try to do, 2 or 3 times, and it was sort of degrading as I was reusing it. I thought, this must be a switch they've made, which was very nice to see. Also, they've gone through the state office building, for example, and turned off about 1/3 of the lights. It must be as irritating to you as it is to me, driving down the road and seeing the whole building lit up. But in the daytime, they've gone through and cut lights down, and they've done that across the system. Last year, I passed the State Green Building Construction Act, which will require all new state construction or substantial renovation to be done with green building practices. The Office of General Services will be establishing those guidelines. I'm also going to be announcing next week that I filed a bill called the State Green School Construction Act. Again, if the state is going to be putting any money into school construction, those schools will need to be built using proven green building practices. And last year I passed a bill that was sponsored by Assemblyman Cahill, the Green Residential Building Grant Program. It's going to go into effect January 1st of 2010, and NYSERDA is going to adopt rules and regulations in order to move that along. But basically, 1-family and 2-family homes will be eligible for grants up to $7,500. Residential buildings with 3 to 6 dwelling units will be eligible for grants up to $11,250, etc. Basically, it's going to provide financial incentives to residents who follow green building standards. And it applies not only to new home construction, but to renovating existing homes as well. I mentioned NYRE. Another thing, 2 other things real quick, the emphasis on rail. The state just released its 5-year rail plan. And we are going to try to use some of the stimulus money to improve the speed of the trip from Albany to New York, which doesn't help us out at all, but it's something we can do right away. And then a lot of my colleagues are focused on what I call the throughway corridor for the high-speed rail from Albany to Niagara Falls. It doesn't get down to Binghamton. I'm attempting to establish the Southern Tier region as really a hub for the freight system. Eventually, if we can get the study that's being done providing travel from the Binghamton area down through Pennsylvania and to Port Jervis in New York City, that may be our better approach, because who would want to go to Syracuse in order to get to New York City the other way around? But just so you know, I'm very, very heavily negotiating and bargaining for what is called an inland port. An inland port would come to the Southern Tier area, and it brings trucks and traffic congestion away from the port, and it reduces the amount of diesel fumes that are in the air down in the port, and trucks come and put cargo on trains here. They stage it locally, and it goes down into the port on trains from here. So you may see me out there a lot more in the future talking about an inland port. It's good for our local businesses. It's good for the air. It's good for congestion. And I think it saves energy in the long run with these trucks rattling down the roads and the impact on our highways. And finally, I am very committed to the local food scene. I have committed, many of you know, to finding the resources needed to help build the permanent farmers market structure that some of you are engaged in studying the feasibility of. I think that working together, we can probably at least meet what they're doing in Ithaca, or at least come into the ballpark on what they've done with their farmers market. And again, it's a good energy strategy. Local foods is really an energy issue, and the intersection of all of these issue areas is really somewhat daunting, but on the other hand, it's very exciting and exhilarating. I believe our challenge is going to be to bring more people to the table. We always seem to be talking to the same basic suspects. And again, I'm committed to bringing the policymakers and the higher education folks. The local business community needs to be here. I've been trying to engage the chamber and business leaders. And once we can translate some of this to a bottom line focus, we have to think the way these various constituencies think. What motivates them? What drives them? What will bring them into our common focus and our common goal? Because clearly what we're doing is not sustainable. Clearly what we're doing we can't go on too much longer at this rate. It's going to be in everyone's interest for us to do better at this. And the quicker we come to a collaborative way of doing things, the better we're going to be in the long run. And to look at what they've done in Ithaca is just a fabulous example of how that can be successful. So I'm doing my part in trying to educate myself with your help as we move along. Thank you.
Thanks. Denny, you're on.
It's a pleasure to be here representing the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority. I actually work for Cornell. We have the contract with NYSERDA for the Energy Smart Communities program, which is a statewide program. There are 10 individuals like myself across the state. 3 of them are in New York City. So that leaves 7 of us for upstate. We each cover regions that are representing several contiguous counties. I represent the Southern Tier region, which Broome and Tioga are a part of. Also Otsego, Shenango, Tompkins, Steuben, Schuyler, and Chemung. So I cover a lot of territory in any given month, mainly because a lot of what I do is work with local communities in, as Donna had mentioned, in collaborative efforts. There are many collaboratives going on in the communities you don't hear about, but believe me, across the very diverse economic sectors in your region, there are a lot of local initiatives that include government and business and not-for-profits, and you name it. Any organization can be represented across every economic sector in the state. NYSERDA's programs are based, at least the Energy Smart Communities program. There are many programs in NYSERDA, first of all. They are a very enormous authority. They have a lot of programs. The Energy Smart Communities program is obviously focused on exactly what our title represents. We cover all economic sectors. Our programs are we bring both technical expertise and we bring financial incentives in a variety of different ways to the communities. We try to work very closely with local representatives and various members of the economic sector to bring NYSERDA programs to everything and anything that's going on in the community. So we sit in partnership with the communities to look at anything we can do to assist in reducing the amount of demand for energy and the amount of energy itself, kilowatt hours, to obviously impact the cost of energy throughout all the economic sectors. My main focus areas is residential, because if you look at the demographics of my region compared to others, we have a lot of representation in our counties with single-family homes, even multifamily 1 to 4 and above, and especially low income. So that's a very high priority for me, and implementing those kind of programs. I sit on a collaborative with the city, looking at a grant, a Restore New York grant, to do exactly that, is to look at a local area, several areas within the city, for example, and bringing these grants in to rehab, refurbish, demolish, and rebuild, and basically improve the neighborhoods and the housing stock. And I commend the city for its aggressiveness. It's a pleasure to work with them. They're very aggressive in promoting that kind of area, and especially for low income. But we do have programs, and we work with a lot of different constituencies. We work with the universities, for example, especially in the research and development area. NYSERDA, as an authority, basically before the deregulation of energy, was primarily a research and development organization. I know when I worked for corporate life, I wrote several grants to them to do a lot of research and development within my operating territories. So that's the genesis, and they cover all aspects of energy. They have research projects, whether it's a simple demand or energy reduction program, and those kind of technologies, to renewables in various aspects. Anything from geothermal, for example, the evolving technologies, looking at wind and solar. So it dovetails very well with the programs that NYSERDA has developed, which are basically consumer-based. This sort of evolution of NYSERDA came after the deregulation, when energy companies were required to deregulate their business, and the power generation that was once the only domain of investor-owned utilities was moved over to the private capitalist operation and maintenance. So your generation now, when energy was deregulated, really shifted from a very regulated organization to a private investor or investor-owned business. That's a significant change there that I don't think all of us really understood at the time, but that definitely sent a signal down the road for where the state and the federal government wanted energy to be aligned. And even the transmission systems were moved from utility-owned and operated to private investor-owned systems now. So there has definitely been a major change in energy deregulation, and NYSERDA morphed into representing the energy efficiency arena once that happened, and so they grew quite a bit, and their programs grew, and that's where we stand today, along with the research and development that dovetails really well. We are responsible to manage all of the state dollars that are gathered through the systems benefits charge, which all of us pay if we are served by an investor-owned utility. That's the source of the state's income. They created that with the deregulation because they knew, as all of us in the business know, and it's been stated here this morning, that energy efficiency and conservation, demand reduction, energy usage reduction is the most cost-effective dollar that can be spent. It's certainly an absolutely necessary alternative to building new power plants. The power plants are old. They have to be maintained. We haven't built a power plant in the state, I don't think, in 50, 60 years. We certainly don't want to unless we have to, and hopefully when we do, it'll be obviously a mix of renewable energy based. That's one of the things we're looking at, and also base load evolving technologies. So that's the kind of thing that NYSERDA looks to do. From a regional standpoint and collaborations, I mentioned we have collaborations with the universities, but we collaborate with all types. You've got major initiatives going on at the federal and state level to look at energy in its entirety and to start changing the face of the energy usage patterns, and to be working closely with neighborhoods, communities, counties, and every economic sector in there to reshape the energy issues. And so that's a tremendous initiative. It's going to be ongoing for a long period of time, I'm sure. And you will see beyond the stimulus dollars, I am sure, as Donna said, with what's going on with the state government and federal government, especially under Obama's administration, looking at carbon taxes, what that is going to do primarily to the larger usage type customers, and which would be universities and corporations and the like. You're going to see a real transformation in the energy world, and you're going to see a lot of new funding sources, very specifically directed at helping to assist in the involvement of energy utilization, energy efficiency, renewable energy, and everything in between. So I think I'd just as soon defer to the next speaker and look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Debbie. Emmaia?
Hi, I'm Emmaia Gelman. I am the Director of Green Policy at the Center for Working Families, which is relatively new, about a year and a half old. It's the new brand of think tank, which is the Think and Do tank. And the doing that we're working on right now and have been working on for about the last year and a half is the creation of a state policy blueprint, essentially sort of putting together all the working parts for a policy before bringing it to the governor and the legislature to enact, to get the state capacity to do 1 million residential retrofits in the space of about 5 years. And just to provide some context, New York State actually has one of the most advanced energy programs in the country. And the residential programs between the Federal Weatherization Assistance Program, which retrofits low-income homes, and NYSERDA's residential programs, which retrofit low-income and higher-income homes, have historically accomplished together about 25,000 units a year, which is good, except that if we don't get faster, we're going to melt. So we have to scale up. And there is an enormous amount of investment that's coming down, as you just heard, in various kinds of energy work, residential and other, and renewables, and particularly commercial and industrial retrofits provide enormous efficiency. But residential retrofits are a little more complicated to tackle for a couple of reasons. One is just the simple fact that it's a lot of projects. There are 7.5 million residential units in New York State. I don't know what proportion of them are 1 and 2 unit homes. Rather, I think it might be like 82% or 1 and 2 unit homes, and the rest are multifamily. Owners of 1 and 2 unit homes often don't have access to capital to do this work privately. Those who are eligible for weatherization assistance can get grant funded, although that money has historically run out. Weatherization has about 48,000 units on its waiting list right now. And what they run out of is funding. Through the stimulus package, what has traditionally been a $60 to $80 million a year program now has about $504 million for the next 2 years, which is great, and they're going to burn through their waiting list. They think there's still another 1 million eligible low-income units that they're not going to get to in that 2 years. And actually, although stimulus money is going to be really important, the weatherization program doesn't expect to have anything more in the following years, the subsequent years, than it had before. It expects to have between $60 million and $100 million a year for low-income units. So that's 1 million units that we may or may not get to at any point. And then the additional funding for the programs that NYSERDA will be administering will reach a lot of homes as well, but it won't get us to the point where we need to be yet. And there's this other issue, which is, there's many other issues, but there's this other issue that the contracting capacity for home performance in New York State right now is essentially maxed out. We've done focus groups with contractors who do the work of NYSERDA and weatherization to ask them, to be like, hey, there's this money coming down the pike. What would it take for you to double your workforce? And the real short answer was, we can't and we're not going to. So there's an enormous lift that's needed in order to help contractors figure out how to do this, and I'll explain what some of the barriers were and how we think we can overcome them. But in order to get to scale, to get residential retrofits to scale, there's a real complex machinery of funding, community outreach, sort of the market transformation, getting people on board with the idea that it's worthwhile, helping contractors establish themselves, helping workers get over the hump, and then putting it all together so that it works as a unit. So Green Jobs, Green Homes New York is a policy blueprint that is intended to do this. And in addition to developing the language of policy and the mechanisms, one of the projects of the last year has been organizing the various stakeholders to be ready to do this. And that includes real grassroots level community groups. I heard you talking about the outreach that you're doing at the community level, and I have to say that that is not common around the state for NYSERDA to be doing. I'm really excited to hear that that's happening, particularly in, sorry to say, but that's one of the things that we're really hoping to do more of. NYSERDA has the sort of the model, but not the volume. So community groups, environmental justice groups, we have not really spent enough time looking at energy efficiency through the optic of race and class and the economic impact that energy efficiency can have, particularly as we're going into the housing stock and upgrading the housing stock to make it more energy efficient and less costly. Labor unions, community workforce development organizations, contractors, utilities, state agencies. This is a very massive little project we've been working on for a while. And I'm happy, I'm going to run through the program and stop talking about it theoretically in a second, but I'm really happy to tell you that in the next couple of days we will be releasing a blueprint, a white paper on the Green Jobs, Green Homes policy. It's going to be co-published by the Center for American Progress, which is a national think tank, and the reason that they picked it up is because the Obama administration has been looking for, they're interested in doing residential retrofits. They have set out to do 2 million residential retrofits nationally over the next couple of years. Don't know the number of years. But really, the question of how remains open. Cities have been able to do this to a certain extent. I'm sure you've heard about the programs in Berkeley and Santa Fe where you can, where the city will finance your solar panels and you can pay it back on your property taxes. But bringing that kind of program to scale and to getting the deep retrofits that we need at the state level has really just eluded people. And so New York actually has the opportunity to put this in place, we're hoping before the end of session in June, and be a national model for how we can do this on a mass scale now, make sure the jobs are good jobs, permanent jobs, and that, in fact, the folks who are doing the weatherization jobs, who are trained up to do this huge number of weatherization jobs over the next 2 years, have jobs that they can move over into after the stimulus money has dried up. And that contractors can expand because they can believe in the demand, because there will be other programs following on the stimulus money, and it won't dry up. So this is what the program does. It is a program to mix public and private capital. The state would create a program, which would probably be housed in NYSERDA, which would do the same kind of stuff that NYSERDA does now, audits, energy audits of homes, the contracting work, the quality assurance, et cetera. The work would be paid for by a private investment fund, so that rather than having to use the system's benefit charge, which is growing but is still finite and can only serve electric and gas efficiencies, there would be a private investment fund that, like Deutsche Bank is looking at investing in, that would raise about $4.5 billion to create a revolving loan fund that would be able to do about $5 billion worth of work in this 5 years. If you are a homeowner, let's start before that. If you're a community group who's interested in having your community targeted, these retrofits would be targeted in chunks of about 1,000 retrofits in a neighborhood. And the reason for that is because contractors really can't expand unless they have some sense of what the volume of work is going to be locally and in a period of time. So we want to help contractors expand. We want to make sure that we can train workers into jobs that are actually going to exist. So there are, let's say, a neighborhood of 1,000 units. You're a community group. You organize. You get folks in your neighborhood interested, maybe even sort of pre-signed up. You apply to the program to have your community targeted, and to be perfectly honest, in the first couple of years, there will probably be fewer applicant communities than target areas, so probably anybody who's organized can get targeted. Each homeowner will either call the program or be contacted, be screened if they're eligible for grant-funded weatherization, and they'll be directed to that instead of into this program, because in this program, the costs are paid up front by the program, but the homeowner eventually pays them back. So for low-income folks, we don't want them to have to pay back the costs. But let's say you're eligible for the program. So you get your audit. The auditor comes out, does the full audit. I know there's been, I don't know how much detail, you're interested in about retrofits, but there's been some concern about auditors if, say, for example, you hire an insulation contractor to come do your audit, do they steer you toward an insulation project, et cetera? In this program, there are sort of safeguards and balances to make sure that every audit tests every possible efficiency and prescribes a whole house-based efficiency program. And the important part is that the audit is specifically designed to locate a whole house package of retrofits that pays for itself within 8 to 10 years. You can choose a contractor, or the program can send you a contractor to do the work. The sort of technicalities of that are, since we're talking about offering contractors the opportunity to bid on 500 units at a time, you have to offer that contractor to a bunch of homeowners in order to get them up to their numbers. But program experience shows that when you offer a homeowner the access to a program contractor rather than the choice of taking their own, that 85% of the time they take the contractor you offer them. So there's choice, but also there's some program design here. The contractor performs the work, everybody signs off on it, and the homeowner never touches money. The program with NYSERDA, having looked at all the building science and sort of certified this for the lenders, draws on the fund, pays the contractor, and notifies your utility. Your utility immediately, starting on your next monthly bill, puts a small repayment charge onto your bill, which should be less than the amount of money that you're saving. It's a projection, it may not be exact, but let's say you're projected to save, $100 a month on your, let's be ambitious, $100 a month on your energy bill. The utility bill will bill you back for $80. You'll see a $20 savings. That $80 goes back to the fund and pays off the investors, so that it's a real market rate investment fund that provides real returns. That's how you raise $4.5 billion. You can't do it if you don't give people good returns. And then at the end of 10 years, you're paid off. If you sell your house, you sell the obligation along with your meter. If your retrofit doesn't work, there's a remediation process. If it really doesn't work, you're relieved of your obligation. And the numbers are projected 35% energy savings average per home. There is no average home, but this should be a program that does a lot of things all at once locally. It should save energy directly. The housing stock in New York emits about 40% of the carbon-based greenhouse gas emissions in the state. It's about 21% comes from actually using the power in your homes, and another 19% from generating and transmitting the electricity. It's a lot. So if you're saving 35% of the energy that's used in the home, and then you're doing that on 1 million homes, and then you're leaving in place a structure that can do it on the other 6.5 million units in the state, you're making a serious dent in carbon emissions. We think that at the end of this, at the end of this program, even not looking at how many other units may be retrofitted, that across the state, consumers will be saving about $1.1 billion on their utility bills. And that's not to mention what other kinds of bills are being saved. That's, the value of housing, improved health outcomes, reduced pressure on sewer systems. I don't know if you guys know, there's about $25 billion of sewer infrastructure work that needs to be done in New York State. And not that we can't get rid of it by using less water, but we can maybe put it off a little bit. And most importantly, because we're talking about a funding stream that's setting project costs, we can actually raise wages for retrofit work, which right now is badly paid and sporadic. We can rationalize the demand for contractors. We can centralize the training mechanism so contractors don't have to train their own workers, which means that if they have to lose a worker or if they have to add workers, that the burden of training doesn't fall on them. We can set project costs that actually assume higher wages, and we can create career paths so that somebody who starts as an outreach worker in their local community group while they're in high school and realizes that they like the idea of insulating can become an insulator, and they can be mentored to become a contractor, and we can expand the green economy in a way that actually benefits local community. So it's a big Christmas tree. I hope everybody likes it. I'm not done. I'll be done soon. The weatherization, the fact that there's a big dump of money right now into the weatherization assistance program is actually helping seed this program. And the reason that I'm so excited to be here is because we've been developing this policy in conjunction with about 150 organizations around the state, but none of them except a couple in Buffalo, really, are really local on the ground in the communities where this work needs to be done. And there is absolutely no way to generate 1 million takers for retrofits without people on the ground in various communities getting excited about it and organizing. Not just organizing to say we want our homes to be energy efficient, but organizing to say we want more money in the community, we want to improve the housing stock. Hey, there's a multifamily building over there that the landlord's been ignoring. Let's organize to get some repairs to that building that are energy efficient and will pay for themselves. Here's some protections for how to do it. So we really, you guys, I spoke in Albany 2 days ago, and you guys are like the second group of real people I've had this conversation with, and it's really exciting. We're starting now. You are real, right? Yeah. Cool. So we think that this will be legislated before the end of June. The Center for Working Families is a small think and do tank, but the coalition that we're working with is enormous. The governor's interested in this. The legislature's interested in this. It seems very likely to happen immediately. And the rollout can only work if people in communities are actually interested and engaged. So I would love to send anybody who's interested this white paper. I will hand out my business cards freely to anybody who's interested in contacting, and would love to talk more to people, contractors, grassroots groups, trainers, government folks, anybody. It's really exciting to be here and starting this stuff with you guys.
Thank you. Thank you. So we're going to go around asking, giving you a chance to ask questions or comments. Like I said, we're really looking for dialogue here. But actually, I want to use my privilege right from square one to actually give a little more information, but then also lead into a question for Emmaia, really. I mentioned that I chair the Broome County Energy Advisory Board, and we are, in fact, looking at a program or developing a program almost, it sounded like almost word for word, like Emmaia was talking about. And we do have a champion, if you will, on the Broome County legislature, and I want to mention his name because you need to give credit where credit is due. It's Jason Garner, and he has committed to at least pressing for it. He can't promise, but he's pressing for the county to put some money on the table that almost sounds like this revolving loan program that you're talking about. So my question to you, Emmaia, is from how you described what you're doing, I'm wondering if it's designed in such a way that it can dovetail with this effort. And again, just to review, we're looking for developing kind of a one-stop shop because we recognize there's a ton of different programs out there, and some of the especially the low-income group, tremendously underfunded, but there is a program that is scheduled to be expanded to retrofit and make their homes more energy efficient. But our idea here is to one-stop, people come in, and then the caseworker kind of direct them to the program that they need to be in. So. Again, my question is this type of program that you're describing, Emmaia, could just build into that?
Definitely it could. The program is designed, first of all, the program right now is just a blueprint. So to the extent that folks are engaged as the legislation is being drafted, there's plenty of opportunity to work stuff in. And that includes, just in case people are interested, that includes different kinds of retrofits. It also includes, to the extent that renewables are cost effective, like solar thermal, and can fall within that 8 to 10 year payback, they can be added in. New technologies can be added in, and new programs can be added in. The only thing we don't want to do is have this program replace anything else. That everything should be, the more capacity we have, the better. But the one-stop shop is really important. Traditionally, weatherization assistance programs and NYSERDA programs, and then also repair programs for homes that are in too much disrepair for retrofits to be cost effective. Meaning, if you have a hole in your roof, doesn't matter if you insulate your walls and change your furnace. And people need funding to support those kinds of retrofits. That kind of sort of one-stop referral system is going to become really important. And also, Green Jobs, Green Homes, because of its focus on community implementation, includes at least the recommendation for serious funding for community groups doing exactly that, having constituency-based groups do outreach, sort of pool people in a one-stop, and work with municipalities. The one other thing that I'll mention is that the stimulus, energy efficiency, and conservation block grant funds are allowed to be used in part to fund for credit enhancements to create a revolving loan fund. And I'm not sure that municipalities have thought about that, about how to leverage, to use their block grant money to leverage lots more in private investment. But to the extent that anybody wants to steal our model of a credit structure, we would totally encourage it.
Okay, great.
Can I mention that I really appreciate sitting here listening to Emmaia, because and I have to compliment her and groups like her that go out and find uses for this money. My boss sits in Washington with numbers, but we really depend on folks like yourself and NYSERDA to actually develop the viable, efficient programs that actually get this money out and working. So it is encouraging to sit here and listen to the enthusiasm, and I just want to say we appreciate that.
And I should also say that Denny has been instrumental. He sits on our board, and I just wanted to thank him for playing an important role there and being a resource to us. So I neglected to say that in his introduction, but I wanted to say that now. Okay, let's open it up for questions.
I have a question about the smart grid concept. My understanding is that the further you send electricity, the more of it you lose going through the wires. What does smart grid mean, and how will it help anything?
Well, I think I'm the one that's going to try and answer that question. The smart grid is like most things as it relates to stimulus process, for example, and that's where the money's coming from, is a work in progress. But I think the objective is multifaceted. There is a need to significantly improve the grid system across the United States for a lot of different reasons. You know, you're in the middle of Voice Your Choice program, was part of the energy deregulation. But when you really look at it, there's no big players in it, and if there's no big players in it, then the ability to really save energy becomes a little bit daunting. But if you have a grid system that is removed of significant bottlenecks, which would relate to making it smarter in the sense of electronically monitoring and gathering data and controlling that system, then you can go a real long way in being able to buy power here in New York when it's cheaper in any other of the regional grids, of which there are scores. That's when you start looking at energy savings and where deregulation really can come to play and really mean something. So when you look at that, you couple all the opportunities to really upgrade and improve the interaction, real-time transmission system, and especially when you couple that with generation. If you can, in fact, you know, you've heard about these smart meters that everybody's going to have in their homes and businesses, and it's a conservation mechanism. These are smart meters. So when you start looking at all of the abilities of technology, you're going to see the whole system from generation through transmission, sub-transmission, through the utilities and into the home and businesses. You're going to see these data gathering, information, real time, being able to really monitor minute by minute what's going on. And there are going to be good things with that, and there are going to be not so good things with that, in the sense that a smart meter will then be able to intelligently monitor what the cost of energy is at any given moment. Now, what's good about that is this, that you will, as a consumer, become educated with that meter, and you will begin to see through rate structure that during a 24-hour period, the rates are going to be significantly different. And how you use that is going to be transitional in how your daily life goes, because you're going to want to be using that information smartly and using energy wisely. So that's part of the transformation in the energy industry when it comes to that very issue right there of not just the transmission systems, but also associated that with that is obviously reliability. You know, they want to make sure that the grid system becomes more reliable. If you get data and you know what's going on minute by minute, you can make better management decisions.
I guess I have two things, both related to local. One is I have somewhat of a concern that on the generation end of all of this, I'm not hearing much about public and I'm not hearing much about micro. One of the things the small grid will allow is for us to be producers of energy on small scales and medium scales as well as consumers. And one of the big concerns I have is given the tenor of deregulation into large private firms for the most part, I don't want to see that replicated in the changes that we have now. But I guess, so I'd like to hear more about how that's not going to happen or how we can make that not happen. The other question I have, frankly, is this group, BRISC, that many of us have founded a year ago of real people, we don't have much in the way of real resources to even approach meeting the goals and needs that we have that are growing daily. And Donna's heard me like a broken record on this. But to the degree to which you have Gay Nicholson yesterday talking about how Tompkins County, in its glorious diversity, is positioned to essentially take in these resources on their own terms. There are not too many places like that. If you really want to see more real people doing things like that, there's got to be real resources. And in upstate, we don't have tons locally, though my druther is local community groups totally locally funded. But at least to get off the ground, we need some help for the state and federal levels and elsewhere. So to the degree to which you can speak to that, I'd like to hear about it. I also really hope, Emmaia, that you're coming to the green building workshop after this. Your stuff has just blown me away, and I want to hear more.
Can I just speak to the second? I don't know if someone's going to speak to your first point. I'm not. The answer is yes, and local community funding is incredibly important to this. There are not it's not on a whole lot of people's radar because traditionally energy programming has been delivered from on high. I think that a lot of different actors are realizing that they can't do it without real community engagement. And depending on who you talk to, there are folks who are interested in. There are two schools of thought. One is you have to go to communities to do the rollout. The other is you have to go to communities before the rollout because the opportunities for renewables and for energy efficiency, for merging those kinds of programming with goals that already exist in communities are much greater when people are thinking about them together. So for example, I keep coming back to this idea that retrofits are housing upgrades. Some of the few community groups that we have been working with the whole time are in Buffalo. And everyone in New York City is talking about green construction. In Buffalo, they're talking about how to tear down their 42,000 extra units and revitalize what they have. Retrofits are an incredibly powerful tool for community organizing in that arena, but only if the planning for how the program works happens there first. So just recognizing that there are two bodies that are called for in this legislation, to get into the nitty-gritty. One is a stakeholder accountability board, which actually is we're trying to organize to exist before the legislation, which would consist of community groups, labor contractors, I could run down the list again, to talk about what the rules should be for targeting communities. So, we have this set of criteria that include like high environmental burdens, high energy efficient, an aging housing stock, low incomes, high unemployment, et cetera. And we also have some criteria, like in order to make sure that that retrofits are available to people who aren't creditworthy, that the utility bill is sufficient. You have to be a utility customer in good standing because that's the repayment mechanism. Well, I don't know what good standing means. I haven't paid my utility bill on time in about 5 years, but I pay it in full when I do pay it. So we have to try and figure out at the community level. Don't tell anybody. We have to figure out at the community level what works for folks. Right? Well, exactly. That's what I'm trying to say. So that's one, and the other is a workforce planning panel, which is going to try and help community groups who are interested in drawing local folks into the workforce and retraining existing workers who have skills but who don't have green skills, with labor unions who are totally newly interested in this and weirdly throwing open their doors as never before because they're worried that they're going to lose the retrofit market in the same way that they lost the affordable housing market. Trying to bring those folks together and then trying to have that set of people sit with contractors so that when we make rules about local hiring and wage standards, that they actually make sense for contractors. And to do that, we think that we need to fund community groups right now.
Just to follow up on the first part, but also to follow up also on the issue of, again, collaborations. You're going to see collaborations become very, 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 very important, and you're going to see grassroots organizational skills be one of those, probably be job creating, actually. I might like to get a job doing that. I've sit on a lot of collaborations. I can say that there are things going on in initiatives, for example, in Tompkins County as one. I'm also going to a meeting up in Otsego County. We're working with the county here to do exactly the kind of micro project where we're working with workforce development and their youth programs, summer youth programs, and beyond, to actually get, for example, in Tompkins County, there's 50 youth. I say youth, it's 14 to 24 years of age, based on the stimulus dollars, to actually go out and work neighborhood to neighborhood, knocking on doors, getting information, introducing themselves, talking about energy efficiency, handing out programs and brochures on energy efficiency. And then there's a whole follow-through in no-cost, low-cost implementations, that kind of stuff. That is the genesis that we're talking about, and obviously we're talking larger scale, because which is going to need larger funding streams, but they're actually local governments and even private partners that are getting involved in this, and we've been talking about it at the Energy Advisory Board level, so those kind of things are going on. And you're going to see, like I said, you're going to see many, many different funding streams occur, i.e. utilities. Utilities can get back into the game of energy efficiency, can play a tremendous role in a myriad of different arenas. They are already being, through their rate structures, being brought back into the energy efficiency with rebates, et cetera, but it's going to go much farther than that. And it's going to actually show up in things like revolving loan funds. This issue of revolving loan funds is being talked about in many communities. But we do have to be careful that we're not, duplicative in what we're doing, that these things are planned out and they are going to dovetail, and you got to look a little bit prospectively. In regards to generation, I can only say that from a NYSERDA standpoint, research and development dollars are significantly being pushed in R&D projects to do just that, local site-related generation alternatives, use of methane, use of fast-growing hardwoods. For example, I'm talking about working with a private company that is looking at and wants R&D dollars to demonstrate that kind of technology and in an associated burn. And there's a lot of that kind of research going on. The micro-enterprise situations and micro-generation. NYSERDA does realistically really support larger projects. There's a reason for that, and I won't go into the public policy process and political arena, but you have to realize this is all funded by systems benefits charge. Everybody pays it. And we work under the Public Service Commission. There has to be basic rules as to how that money is used. We can't just use it any old way. We have to reflect that this money comes from everyone, and therefore the programs must reflect the priorities that are developed through the public policy process. So I certainly charge you with using the public policy process whenever possible, and to get yourselves involved in greater collaborations, because the numbers mean everything. But back to the generation, NYSERDA really looks at the larger, the Golisano type projects, private money funded, big, large grid size, because that's the priority at the moment. We need to get renewable energy projects that are large. If you understand renewable energies, you realize to replace a kilowatt hour of base load generation that's gas-fired or coal-fired, the number of units, whatever it may be, whether it's wind or photovoltaic or whatever, have to be multiplied times thousands to get the same per unit value out of those technologies. This is something that's not talked about a lot, but I can tell you that the issue of generation is going to be a big issue in the future. We need to be diversified, but you have to understand that 24/7 generation is what drives the economies, and somehow you've got to get big, large renewable projects going to have any chance of really representing a significant impact, which is why the governor and the state and federal government have created these super goals and objectives in that arena. So big projects are very important, but NYSERDA has projects when we work with homeowners, small businesses to do all kinds of renewable projects. There are incentives through NYSERDA as well as the tax credits.
Okay. Try to be quick, but I think it's about, one of the things about folks in the sustainability movement is we recognize linkages. Emmaia, you mentioned that we may not have the funds in a couple years after our, there is one place that there's a major source of funds. It's called the Pentagon. And I think over the last 30 years, both Democrats and Republicans have basically been an abject failure in developing an energy policy for the nation. And I think if you take into account the costs of asking those who have sworn to defend and protect the Constitution to serve basically as security forces for Chevron, ExxonMobil, or Amoco, we recognize that this is an incredible waste of resources. I mention this because here New York State has talked about a rail plan over the next 20 years, $12 billion. That's 1 month in Iraq. So there's talk of reducing the Pentagon budget, but then instantly you get into that worries, well, you're taking money from my district. What is the Congressman's position on dramatic reductions in the Pentagon? And also, why aren't there ways where if you're going to reduce the amount of funds for the Pentagon and possibly lose engineering jobs, we need engineers to help with rail. We need engineers to develop the smart grid. Why aren't we earmarking that money directly then towards these policies?
Well,
I think that's for you, Bob.
I'm assuming he's in. I mean, I really can't speak directly for the congressman, except I can say that he was a strong advocate for the withdrawal of Iraq, and that started 3 years ago when we started our first campaign. And he's exposed that over and over and over again. It was one of the cornerstones of his original campaign back in, 2006, where we should get out of Iraq. I've heard him say often, he's been to Iraq twice, by the way, he's been to Afghanistan twice. And one of the cute stories he always tells is when he was with a national leader in Iraq, and he said, well, what else can we do for you? And he said, well, we need schools, we need roads, we need water, we need sewer. And Congressman said, well, I need that in my district. So, why are we spending this enormous chunk of money in a foreign land and not have that available right here? I think it's interesting. We've been taking, quite honestly, we were talking earlier, enormous amount of heat over this so-called stimulus pack and TARP and the bailouts and whatever. And we get a lot of pushback from people saying we really shouldn't do this. And yet I noticed on the governor's website, there are something like 878 pages of projects submitted by municipalities throughout this state. So, and there are about 25 projects per page. It works out to something like 24,000 projects. So apparently someone within New York State thought that this money would be useful other than in Iraq. It also amazes us a little bit at the same people that are pushing back over the current stimulus money and the president's and the House's budget were the same ones who sat very silently while we funneled enormous amounts of money into a war that really is not going to help us in the long run. I think we've seen some numbers that say that we're looking at maybe at the end of the day, in treating our veterans that come home properly, whatever, a $3 trillion investment there. And I don't think we got a very good return on our investment. So I think your point is well taken. Obviously, military is a huge part of the national budget. Some of the teabaggers that who've been kind enough to send us bags lately, I have to ask them, what part of the federal budget do you really want to cut? And when you look at the three biggest portions of it, it's military. The second portion is Social Security. The third part is Medicare. Medicare, unless we get our health issues solved, will soon take over, will outspend Social Security, per se. So for our teabaggers friends, I say, you know, which part of us would you like to cut out? So it's, your point is well taken, and I'm sure the Congressman is aware of that.
I'm wondering if there are programs that might help communities or townships develop community-owned renewable energy generation facilities, or programs that use many producers.
Yes.
Yeah, I was going to say, Dennis, there are.
And right within the time frame.
There are many programs for local communities and municipalities. I'll just give you one example that I think is important, and where both NYSERDA's research group and its consumers groups work together. Wastewater. Wastewater and how it's treated, for example, is a major, obviously for any community, it's a major expense, it's a major system. There are technologies that are evolving, and both from an operational sense and from a water treatment sense, that communities can take advantage of. NYSERDA has basically a municipal wastewater treatment program, a specific program to work with governments to improve those systems, and in fact, research and development has significant amount of money available just for that as an example. The general approach to NYSERDA is, if you want it, if you think you need it, and you want to see what is available, get a hold of me. You can contact NYSERDA. You can get on the website, www.getenergysmart.org or powernaturally.org. There are many ways to get in. You can actually ask and submit a project of any sort, no matter who you are or who you represent, and have it submitted to NYSERDA for consideration. That's just beyond the myriad of programs available. And if you want to know more, you can see me after this.
Dennis, I'd like to follow up too. There's also the Department of Agriculture, USDA, Rural Utility Services, particularly deal with communities 10,000 and less. There's a variety of different programs with them. There's also the community block grant programs, which I'm sure Donna is familiar with. So there are a number of areas that you can look into for help. I remember years ago, with a prior job, working with a small town out in Wyoming County, who was trying to build a community digester. They had a huge amount of large dairy farms there, and it became an issue. And actually, the community was considering building their own digester. I don't think it ever happened, but there were money available actually for them to do that had they got the thing organized.
I want to thank the panel.